Welcome into an emergency edition of the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz, making faces at the camera. Those of you listening, I don't really know how to describe it. Wide-eyed, kind of shaking his head back and forth.
It's my emergency face.
That's your emergency face.
That's my emergency face.
Okay. Well, the reason we are having an emergency podcast instead of just talking to you on a normally scheduled Tuesday podcast, Nebraska and head coach Matt Rule has chosen to go in a different direction with their offensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield out, Dana Holgorsen into the big chair. Bruntz, before we get too deep into all of it, what's your level of surprise that this all went down as early as it did? I think we were all expecting Dana Holgorsen to end up in this role for 2025. I don't know that I saw it happening in 2024. What about you?
Yeah, it was funny. Like I was actually on the way to the press conference today, and was texting with some national folks at 24/7, and they were reiterating their belief that this was going to be the outcome for 2025, and that's been kind of the assumption all along. But yeah, I mean the timing of it now, when it was not announced last week, and when we heard from Matt Rule on Monday, it sounds like things were kind of trending that way, but but not official. The timing is unique. I mean, you don't often see. I mean, I can't think of an example offhand. I'm sure there's a few where mid-season you bring in somebody from outside the organization to run your offense. I mean, that just does not happen very frequently. So I think you have to have an appreciation for the uniqueness of that. I and kind of talking through some of this with Brian after the press conference. I mean, I think if you're able to make that work, I think there's some advantage to doing it now with the way the college football calendar is currently constructed. And I mean, frankly, Nebraska's offense needs a little bit of a jolt. I mean, I don't know, what this actually is going to be in terms of production, but I mean, if Matt Rule kind of just flew, I think he threw out 7 to 10 points, I think was what he said today. If we could just add that, they'd be doing fine. I mean, at 7 to 10 points, the season looks a lot different, just based on the way things have played out. And obviously, Nebraska's well documented issues in one score games. So it's a big move. I mean, I hope people don't lose sight of the fact that that this is a pretty big change of direction in the middle of the season like this, especially with somebody from outside the organization who wasn't even in town until Sunday. I mean, it's
Yeah.
been 8 days.
Yeah. And you've got 3 games with the stated goal of just getting those extra bowl practices and giving them something to play for that hasn't happened here for a while. What did Matt Rule have to say about Dana Holgorsen in specific? Like why was this individual targeted, and how do you feel about the kind of marriage there of Dana Holgorsen and Matt Rule? I kind of forgot about this. Like, it's just the state of college football being what it is. They crossed over when they both coached in the Big 12. When he was at West Virginia and Rule was at Baylor, and it's like, oh yeah, they would know each other pretty well.
Yeah, and it goes back further than that. I think they cross paths quite a bit at coaching conventions. As big as college football is, it's actually a pretty small world,
World.
especially among people who have been doing it for as long as both of those guys have. It's we can get into this a little bit. I mean, everybody hears Dana Holgersen's name, and then immediately goes to Mike Leach, and immediately goes to air raid, and immediately is getting the vapors thinking about Cliff Kingsbury and BJ Simons and things like guys like that chucking the ball all over the place. But I think if you dig in a little bit more, his offenses have actually been pretty balanced in some ways. A lot of the run concepts that Dana Holgersen has used, everybody runs, and so I don't think it's. I don't think at least in season now for the next 3 games you're going to see this huge pivot to something completely different. I mean, I could see that certainly the sequence of play calling is going to look different. I think you might see different personnel in different positions. I think you also might see um, maybe just frankly things a little bit pared down. I think one of the things that's true that Matt Rule talked about today, and very briefly about the direction of play calling this season, is it's felt like you're trying to do too much and not doing enough because of it. And you got to get this guy involved, and you got this guy involved, and you got to do this and you do that, and then it starts to feel like we've talked about. It's a little bit like that bingo wheel, and pulling plays out. So I think that's where kind of a fresh set of eyes helps you a little bit, is being able to come in, look at the personnel, and also kind of being forced to edit and do things a little bit more streamlined than maybe what you've been doing at this point in the season. I mean, you've been talking to people who have covered him at different stops today. I mean, what was the feedback that you got on everything?
Yeah, I mean the big takeaway that I had just talking with Chris Anderson, who covers West Virginia for 24/7 Sports, he basically just put it as this: whatever Nebraska's personnel strengths are, Dana Holgorsen's going to find a way to build around that. And so when West Virginia had teams where they could run the ball effectively, they ran the ball effectively, and they didn't hesitate to do that. When they were built with Geno Smith and Taven Austin and Stedman Bailey, they were going to throw the ball. Like it's kind of simplistic, but he just sort of uses the personnel that he has and builds the offense around it. Chris felt like, in his opinion, regardless of anything else that was happening at West Virginia, and there was a lot that I think was going on with behind the scenes, there was never any doubt about the effectiveness of the offense. So they had some years in there that weren't as good. But for the most part, that was a program where offensively they were going to challenge teams, move the ball, spread teams out, and then look for ways to attack. And he basically said, I mean, depending on the looks they were getting from Big 12 teams, Dana loved nothing more than to have four wide and then just run it up the middle. So if you didn't have linebackers in the right spot, he was going to punish you for that. If you decide to have too many linebackers in the box, you were getting out routes quick to the wide receivers and letting them play in space. I mean, a lot of it was sort of streamlined, simple stuff. And I think that, when you talked about paring things down, I think some of it is that, like, just, this is a look that they're showing you. This is the antidote to what we want to do. This is the part of the field we want to attack. Here's the play call, and this is what the hot route, or this is what the audible is if you need to do it. And so it just sounds like potentially a more efficient version of an offense. The fascinating thing is that the personnel that he used at West Virginia is not what he will have here, at least his first or last 3 weeks of the season, where they didn't really use tight ends at all in that offense. And here you've got an offense that, has used a heavy package a lot, both to try to run, but also likes to involve their tight ends in the passing offense. So what does it look like for Thomas Fidone, the rest of season? He's probably in line, but you could also split him out. Like, there's different things that they can do. I think it's a benefit for a guy like Carter Nelson. Like, I think Carter Nelson is going to benefit as much as anybody. Maybe Ja'Cory Barney is the next person in that vein, with sort of the creativity of a guy who used to be the inside wide receivers coach for Mike Leach, which was a real wide receivers coach position. And other people that have coached that, Lincoln Riley, other people that have gone on to be the offensive coordinators or head coaches in college football. So I think there's a real benefit to some of the personnel. It's going to look different these 3 games, and I think it will in the 2025. But I'm really curious, Bruntz, how it all lines up just based on the conversations with Chris. He basically said he would bet on Dana Holgorsen putting together an offense that'll challenge teams. And he especially likes it because there's not a lot that Dana has to do outside of putting that offense together. You take the recruiting and the sort of stewardship of running a program out of the way, just let the mad scientists play with the offense. It's kind of what it seems like Nebraska might be doing here.
It's interesting. You mentioned the kind of you were getting to it, but like his aggression as a play caller, I think is something that's pretty well documented. you know, it's kind of seen that since Matt Rule's been at Nebraska that there's been a kind of a comfort level with playing Big Ten West style football. You're playing field position, you're playing the wind, you're basically kind of getting yourself ready for a 4-quarter game where you're probably going to have to make a stop or make a late score, and you're kind of playing into those 1-score games. And he was asked today, like how much of that style of offense would seem to be a departure from what the stated goal has been at Nebraska. And I think he's kind of understood and come to understand this season, especially, that they need to score points. I mean, he kind of made a joke about it, like, what does this fly in the face of what you want to do? And he said, well, I want to score points. But I mean, it's a different way of approaching things. He said that he believes that Dana Holgorsen's a more aggressive play caller, which Matt Rule said that he typically is not on that side of the ball. But he's also more of a defensive guy. I mean, that's he's coached offense, but I think he would probably identify more as a defensive first coach. So having somebody to kind of push the gas pedal at times, I think is okay. And I think they have the personnel to do that in some cases. I think especially on the outside at the wide receiver spot. And, I think that's the area where you can probably expect to see a fair amount of improvement over these 3 games, or different usage is with the wide receivers and what Nebraska is trying to do with the passing game. I guess assuming that, Dylan Raiola is healthy and can play against USC, which is another kind of wrench in that conversation. But, I am expecting it to look a little bit different, because this is not the plodding, huddle up, that kind of style that I think Matt Rule had kind of desired when he came to Nebraska. I'm eager to see if he moves from that a little bit, because it seems like this kind of a move would suggest that he's willing to do that.
Yeah, well, and I think you hit on it. I mean, plotting is how you would describe Nebraska's offense over the last month, when it has definitely turned for the worse. You go to those Indiana possessions where it just felt like you had to piece together 4-yard play after 4-yard play after 4-yard play to try to get down the field, or even just go recently back to the UCLA game where you're down double scores and you're playing with almost no urgency to try to score or to try to move the ball in chunks, even though the clock is working against you. And so
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think they need a mind or a mental reset of what they're trying to do offensively. The important thing though is just like can't happen overnight. Like this is I don't look for them to come out in a 5-wide set against USC and just start throwing the ball all over the place or trying to hammer an inside run spread out without having the ability to show that they can block it or run it. So he's going to have to work within the framework of what they have and figure out how you can kind of win a game or games, because that's the goal. It's not just a 6 win. Like I think of the things that Matt Rule talks about a lot, that's one of the things I really agree with. Getting to 6 is what people want because they want the bowl game, but the idea isn't just to go play in Detroit or New York or wherever the Belk Bowl is held or whatever it is.
Charlotte, it's in Charlotte, Mike, and it's the
The
Duke's Mayo.
idea,
It's the Duke's
yeah,
Mayo Bowl now. Get it right.
sorry. The idea is that you need to or should want to win enough games to play in something meaningful, but also that you're building towards something. Because I feel like that had been lost in the last month. Like it felt like Nebraska had scuttled its building plans, had fired its architect, and was starting over from scratch. And it's kind of effectively what happened here on the offensive side of the ball. And so I'll be curious how they can marry that together for these final 3 games and then what it ultimately looks like. But I'll tell you this much. I like the aggression to do it. I like the sense of urgency and the knowledge that, like, hey, we can't afford to, for the lack of diplomacy, F this up. Like they can't. They have to get a win here. Like there's no version of this that's going to go well if you finish 5-7 again. You're not going to get a pass. No one's going to be like, oh well, hey, they didn't show improvement. The future isn't bright. Like you have to give people a reason to buy into your team. And I think today started the possible process where people are going to be buying back into Nebraska if they're able to build upon it.
Well, yeah, and it signals it's an accountability thing too, right? Like if you're preaching accountability to your players, I think there's also there also needs to be that on the coaching side as well. And I don't, I heard this a lot, the last 10 days or so after the UCLA loss of, is he going to make a change? Is he going to, stay with his, stand behind his guy? And, I don't get the sense that Matt Rule is afraid to make changes that are necessary to move this thing forward. Like I think that's pretty clear by now, that he's willing to do that. And it's also a little bit of a signal too to the players. Like, look, like I think some people read this as him, throwing the players under the bus last week. But I mean, you also need guys to make plays.
Yep.
Like you can't catch a 5-yard pass in the flat with space in front of you and fall down. Like you can't keep missing the same block. You can't keep, missing your gap. Like as you've made the change on the coaching side now you need guys to play well the last couple weeks. And I think it's kind of been hand in hand of things kind of going down the tubes the last 3 games. And just you just need to see improvement here, because I think you're right. Like it was kind of reaching a point out there that patience was running out. And I don't think this resets the deck, but I think it's a signal that they're willing to move this in a different direction if they have to. And obviously they had to, because I mean, status quo was not going to get you anywhere those last 3 games, I don't think.
Do you think any of the urgency to do something like this also has to do with what the picture of the Big Ten looks like right now and then moving forward? Because this conference is going to be a fight every single year. And even if you take the most optimistic view of what has transpired here in 2024, and then you take the optimistic view of what they have coming in the 25 class, it's hard not to look at Nebraska as in some sort of football purgatory, because you're not seeing a ton of development in terms of the young players, or you're not seeing the kind of development that you want to see this season with some of the young players. You have this veteran team, and yet you're stuck in the same cycle where you're not able to get over the hump.
Yeah.
So to me, like, this move was going to happen. I think we all knew this move was going to happen. Doing it now maybe also lets you kind of announce for the upcoming portal season, like, hey, we're shifting this thing and it doesn't look like what it used to. And
Mhm.
we're going to need some pieces to help us out along the way.
I agree. Well, and it goes both ways too, because I mean, if this does go beyond 3 games, which I think there's a pretty significant chance that it will, um, you have 3 games and basically a month of practice to know as a coordinator what you have and what you need. And when the portal opens in December, I mean, Nebraska's going to have to get they're going to have to be more active this year. I mean, there's no way around that. That they've got guys that they can count on. You need to find more guys that you can count on. And I think having that knowledge, having gone through games, is significantly more helpful than taking over in the middle of December and kind of assuming rather than knowing. And I think to your broader point, that I think with the change in the Big Ten and expanding the size of the conference, it feels like you're going to have every year maybe like 3 or 4 teams that are kind of upper crust, like tier one type teams, a huge middle like you have right now, where you've got a ton of teams that are between 4 and 6 wins, and then you've got a few that are kind of down below in the bottom.
Purdue.
Yeah, Northwestern maybe too. I mean, you would have put UCLA there 2 weeks
Yeah,
ago.
instead they're on a 3-game winning streak.
They're on a heater. But I do think you've got to find whatever edge you can in that huge middle pile of teams to be able to emerge, or at least get to the top of that pile. Because I just you're seeing it somewhat with the SEC now, where there's so many teams that are kind of just grouped together. The talent disparity is not as wide as it used to be, I don't think, at a lot of these schools. And so you got to get the coaching piece of it right, and you got to get the right players. And I think that they certainly needed to upgrade offensively what they're doing, because the way things were trending, you were not going to get out of that middle pack with some of the way things were going.
Yeah. And I mean, you talked about they got to go into the portal in the same vein of you had to pull a Dana Holgorsen out of your hat to potentially save your offense and save where you want this program to go. I think it's imperative they get a legitimate, I don't want to say stud, I don't want to say star, but like you can't keep getting C pluses and like it's yes, you're better, but they need a difference maker on offense that isn't Raiola. And I don't know where that's going to come from. And maybe Ja'Cory Barney can be that guy. Maybe Carter Nelson can be that guy. Maybe Jalen Lloyd can be that guy. We'll see what the offense can do for the pieces that are here. But I also think they need probably someone that comes from the outside at running back or wide receiver that you can just reliably go to and can be a player for you. Because I think they're very much just in that vein of like, well, you got the quarterback. And then, we experienced that all of 2019, 2020, and parts of 21. That's not going to save you. It's never going to save you. Like you got to have when you talk about guys making plays, that's what I'm talking. Like you got to have someone that can just go get you a play when you need it.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, and you'd hope you have more guys like that too.
Right.
And that's been the problem. I mean, even guys who I would say were that type of player in the past here, you only had one or two of them on your offense.
Yeah, Trey Palmer and Samari Toure. That's basically it.
And even I was even thinking of a guy like a Stanley Morgan or somebody that was reliable in that way. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of guys right now, and that if you're an opposing defensive coordinator, that really scare you. And so that's you're going to have to upgrade there for sure. And maybe this helps a little bit. I mean, this is a an offense that historically has put up big numbers and has won a lot of games. So you would hope that would be attractive to somebody that is a potential difference maker in that way. But yeah, I mean, I think that's why the timing of it is actually a little bit fortuitous for Nebraska. That if there is progress to be shown over these last 3 weeks, you can certainly sell. You can sell over here and don't look so much over here. And I think there's that will help Nebraska a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable. This game on Saturday against USC is going to feature a brand new quarterback for the Trojans and a new offensive coordinator for Nebraska, and it's November. Like just a wildly different. This game, the records of the team that are in it, any of the buzz or excitement that was around it, is so dramatically different than how your brain put this whole thing together before the season started. Like this is a classic. You don't play the season on paper type game right here.
Well, not only that, but I mean, depending what Nebraska's quarterback picture looks like, Matt Rule seemed a little bit less confident in his tone today that Dylan Raiola was going to play against USC than he was last Monday. Don't know if that's gamesmanship. Don't know, if he was just. They honestly don't know because they didn't practice today. But I mean, there's a world where Heinrich Haarberg runs out there as your starting quarterback for offensive coordinator Dana Holgorsen against USC on Saturday. Which, why not? Let's get wild.
Yeah, and then Holgorsen just calls up a game that's just triple option left, triple option right, and right up the middle. USC never sees it coming.
Just goes full full Taylor Martinez against K-State on USC. Poor unsuspecting USC.
I knew that he was the OC at Oklahoma State before he ended up at West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot that it was 2010.
Yep.
When they were absolutely fantastic with Brandon Whedon and Justin Blackman. And, I can't remember the name of the little running back that they had that was good. I think he got drafted by the 49ers. It's one of those, I'll see the name later and it's going to annoy me. But, yeah, he had an offense that one year.
Kendall Hunter, Mike.
Kendall Hunter?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's good. That offense was good. That 2010 Oklahoma State-Nebraska game, that's a fun random game to just put on sometime.
The Kendall Hunter that year, by the way, 1,548 rushing yards, 16 touchdowns, and was a Doak Walker Award finalist. And maybe not the team's number one option.
Yeah. Well, so we'll see what Dana Holgorsen can do for Nebraska's offense. We will, I'm sure, discuss some of this again here on Tuesday when we get together for the Husker247 podcast. We'll discuss plenty of other things as well. It's a busy week at Husker247. You're going out to sunny California. I'm going north to Sioux Falls for basketball. BC will be with you. We got all the coverage. Everything people want can be found at Husker247.com. We've got more Dana Holgorsen coverages there as well. We've got columns. We've got more stuff from Chris Anderson. We have statistical look-ins, everything you could want and need on Dana Holgorsen. Find it at Husker247.com. Bruntz, anything you want to add?
No, I'm good. That was a good exit. Get us out of here.
All right, it's time to go. For Michael Bruntz, I'm Mike Schaefer. We're Husker247. We'll catch you next time.